Welcome to Medical Ethics. One of the questions you might be asking yourself the first session of this class is, why are we studying ethics? And one of the things is that you really need it as a basis for your success as an administrator. Healthcare, as we know, is constantly changing, and the answers of what to do next, how to react to the new technology that's very expensive, is not always black or white, sometimes gray, sometimes there is no answer, there is no precedent. And the community that we serve really expects a lot of us. So they expect us to have a background and have an understanding of the issues involved in all the decisions we make. That's one of the reasons why we're going to start with what I call the old white guys. And you're saying, why are we starting with people like, say, Thomas Aquinas? Well, they have ideas that are sort of the background of the conflicts you're going to face when you're dealing with medical ethics issues. So for Aquinas, it's always about we have to provide happiness and goodness, and there's always truth. And what happens, though, is that that's not always the case, right? So we have some obligations that we have to fulfill, and they're not always based on rational decisions. Could you, for instance, limit health care because of the costs to those who are most in need? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? So that's the kind of questions that you grapple with him. With Immanuel Kant, we talk about this whole idea that everyone has value. So if everyone has value, then we have to help everybody with every single decision. And everybody has to have access to everything all the time. That's a problem because then we have to give life-saving interventions to people whether they want them or not, and we have to give it to them even if it's going to mean somebody else is not going to get the money. The problem with this is that you run out of money really quick. There is a limit to what we can do. There's a cost to everything we do, and for those of you of economics, if you spend resources, then that automatically takes away from other people who might need the resources too. So you see right away we have this collision between cost and giving the community what they want or what they need, and how do they know what they need, and if one person gets something, the other group doesn't. Then we sort of move on to John Stuart Mills, and he thinks about it as utility, right? So the ends justify the means, so we can do whatever we want now so that we get to where we want to in the end. This causes a problem because sometimes doing things in the interim impacts the end, and that also makes it seem as though people are only good for what we want from them at the very end, as opposed to they're good within their own right. Again, we come right up against Immanuel Kant, who says everybody matters, right? So collisions right away. And this is, again, preparing you for what we're going to have every week, which is this sort of collision between ideas. The next person we talk about is John Rawls, and he has this really interesting idea about justice. And it is based on social justice, and it's based on the fact that when the top gets something, that the bottom has to get something in equal measure so that you keep moving up and up and up and up together. The problem with that is that you keep moving up together, but you never make it so that they're equal with you. So if I get a raise, and that means if I get a $10,000 raise, that everybody else gets a certain percentage raise too, that still doesn't mean they're equal with me. That still means we maintain that distance. It's a lot better than I get mine, you don't get anything, but it's still sort of social justice and sort of not. And we've seen lots of corporations do those kinds of things, not in America, but in other countries. So that gets problematic also. And then we just want to move to Martin Buber. And with him, he's sort of talking about how you think about the other. So are you thinking about the other as it's them versus me? Or are you thinking about them as I and you, so they're still the other, or thou and thou, so that we're equal, and what I want for myself, I also want for you. And it's a very different way of thinking about how you practice as a healthcare provider and what you will provide as a healthcare provider. How do you organize employees? Do you make sure that everybody gets equal access to things? Do you think of them as equal and even with you? So that's sort of the concepts he's getting at in that. And then we also move to other people who think about how do you help everybody get on board with how you think about ethics. This is important because one of the things you're going to do as a health administrator and a leader is to be the ethics that everyone follows. So you have to sort of make sure that you're following a certain standard, and how you apply that also matters. But people are going to look at it from their perspective of where they get it applied versus how you think everybody's seeing it from one perspective. So it gets a little bit more tricky again. One of the things I do want you to take away from this reading and this understanding is that ethics is really a way to study moral behavior, so the outcomes do matter and how you act matters, and that it's not just obeying certain laws, that we're trying to think of normative and organizing ways of doing ethics in the workplace in order to help and be the mirror for the people that we serve. And there's professional ethics and there's personal ethics, and sometimes they match and sometimes they don't. When they are disjointed is when we usually see people having problems. Do as I say, not as I do. We see organizations fall apart. We see patients not getting the kind of care and attention they need. So it's really important we understand these old white guys, because all of these ideas, also in conflict, are also the background of how we apply the next concepts that we're going to talk about.